Financial Argument. Follow us on YouTube.
Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, in the past couple of days, we have seen the gold price suppressed. Now, we know that gold and silver, the precious metals market, they are manipulated. We know because HSBC, Deutsche Bank, Nova Scotia, UBS, and most likely many others, they have been manipulating the gold market. There's lawsuits now, charges being brought up on these different banks, and we know the central bank is always behind all of this, controlling the other banks. And what's very interesting is that the gold price was brought down quite a bit, and it looks like someone decided to dump about 2.25 billion of notional gold into the futures market and bringing the gold back down to the 1250 level. Now, of course, we know that this is manipulation. We've seen in the past where thousands upon thousands of contracts are thrown at the gold market to bring it down. And we can see right now, every time the gold price is dropped by this much, there's normally some type of financial event about to happen, or they're getting prepared for news to come out about something. Maybe it's Deutsche Bank. We know the unemployment numbers came out today. But it's always something, there's always a reason why they do this. Because they're trying to keep this economy looking like it's still in recovery mode. But that whole entire mantra of we recovered, well, it's falling apart completely. We see by the unemployment numbers, the unemployment rate has risen back up to 5.0%. We know this is not the real number. This is the manipulated number. But we can see right now it's getting more and more difficult for the central bankers, the U.S. government, to manipulate these numbers, because it's getting very difficult to do so. Because what happens is, as more and more people are unemployed, what do they say? Half the country, they don't want to work anymore? 3/4 of the country, they don't want to work anymore? Actually, before the numbers even came out, Goldman was out there saying that they thought the job numbers were going to be adding about 200,000 jobs. But really, the numbers came in where they only added about 156,000 jobs. So we see right now that there's about 94 million people out of the labor force. And when we look at these job numbers, when you hear the numbers, you think, oh, look, people are gaining full-time jobs, everything is fine. But realistically, these individuals are not getting these full-time, high-paying jobs. They're getting part-time, low-paying jobs. And what we are seeing right now is that the job numbers of those who are working full-time, it is continually falling. Because when you look at the breakdown in September job quality, the number of multiple job holders, or people who are forced to hold more than one job due to insufficient wages or for other reasons, that is increasing. Because there's about 301,000 more people in America holding more than one job, the fifth highest monthly spike in the past decade. The total number of multiple job holders soared to 7.863 million, the highest number since the financial crisis. And a number surpassed just once in the past decade in August of 2008, just before the entire system completely broke apart. So it also begs the question, how many of the 156,000 jobs added were double counted as a result of number of multiple job holders that was double this amount? Well, you have to think about this for a second. The way the U.S. government central bankers count jobs is they count a part-time job as a full-time job. So if you have 1, 2, 3 jobs, that's 1, 2, 3 full-time jobs. if you lose that part-time job, they don't really count it as losing a full-time job, because the rules state, and it's different from each state, it depends on how many hours you work and what your salary is, your part-time salary. So if you're not earning enough and you're not working enough hours, they don't count you as losing a full-time job. This is how they manipulate these numbers. So where did the September jobs go? Well, it looks like they went to waiters, bartenders, and we can see right now in September that number increased by 30,000. And the number of low-wage workers increased by 300,000 over this year so far. So more than half of the 156,000 jobs added in September went once again to minimum wage workers. What about the higher paying jobs? Well, manufacturing, that has declined by 13,000. Transportation, warehousing dipped by 9,000. There was no change in mining and logging workers. Financial activity workers, that only rose by 6,000 in September. So we can see right now, this situation with the job market, it is not improving, it is actually getting worse. Now, these are all manipulated numbers that the government is feeding us. And when you look at what has happened going back in time, let's go back to 2014, for instance. The U.S. has added 547,000 waiters and bartenders and has lost 32,000 manufacturing jobs. If we go back to 2007, the U.S. has gained 1.7 million waiters and bartenders and has lost 1.5 million manufacturing workers. In 2016, 58,000 manufacturing jobs have been lost. This is not a recovery. Now, this is a manipulation by the U.S. government central bankers. When you look at other calculations, like John Williams from Shadow Stats, we can see the job numbers, the unemployment rate, is very close to 30% compared to what the U.S. government central bankers are telling us. And Challenger Gray and Christmas is also reporting there are more and more people being laid off. Now, what's very interesting is that the corporate media is trying to explain why this is happening, why the unemployment rate went up a little bit. They're saying that the U.S. is nearly out of people to hire. They can't find any more people. Jobs are all filled up. We've run out of people. There's no one left to put into these jobs because we have all these job openings. Now remember how this whole thing works. The job openings in the corporations are job openings that they're never going to fill, because corporations, what they normally do is they don't like to take the job recs away. They leave the job openings open. They might interview people. Most likely they don't interview people, but they never fill them, because each department is very nervous to say, okay, since we can't hire anyone, we don't need this job rec. Also, coming down from corporate, they tell you, listen, we're going to keep all these job recs open, but at this point, we're in a hiring freeze. You cannot hire someone, but you still need to look for those individuals. And this is why we see this problem today. It's not because we're running out of people. It's because corporations are laying off more and more people. And when you're laying off people, you usually freeze hiring. Companies that aren't hiring, normally they just freeze hiring altogether because they're staying even. They don't want to move in either direction. We see the real estate market is continually falling apart. We know that New York, that real estate market is declining. The Hamptons declining. San Francisco declining. Florida declining. We see in Chicago, the real estate market turned in a weak performance in September. Closings were down by 0.9% from last year and also down from 2013. The Illinois Association of Realtors, they're going to report a 3.2% decline in sales. Contract activity, which precedes closing by 1 to 2 months, is telling us that momentum is sliding and real estate is declining. So we're starting to see all these areas where everything is starting to come to a screeching halt and everything's starting to decline. Wholesale inventories, they have contracted for the first time in 6 years. There's a 0.1% decline year on year. This is the first time since June of 2010, and it always coincides with a U.S. economic recession. And this is where we are headed. We see the Atlanta Fed has cut its third quarter GDP forecast by 45% in 2 months. They continually are revising, and bringing down the GDP. Most likely, we're going to be under or very close to 1% of GDP when this is all said and done. We see right now that Deutsche Bank is in a huge amount of trouble. There were rumors that Qatar Investment was going to take a huge investment in Deutsche Bank. It looks like that was rejected. Deutsche Bank is continually exploring capital to help out the situation that they're in. There are reports that there is some type of investor who's going to do a capital inflow into Deutsche Bank. But again, this is a Band-Aid fix. What happens as time goes on? We can see that this situation is not going to get better at all. Actually, they tried this in 2008 with Bear Stearns, AIG, and all the others. And each time they needed more and more and more because the system is failing. And this is what we're seeing right now. We're seeing the start of it. We're seeing that the United States government central bankers, they are terrified of the new Silk Road. We know that Putin, we know that Xi Jinping from China, they're creating the Silk Road. And what they're doing is they're creating a Eurasia integration. And what they're going to do is they're going to create this Silk Road, which is going to be made up of a vast network of highways, high-speed rail, pipelines, ports, fiber optic cables. And Beijing is betting that the overwhelming majority of nations across Eurasia would rather invest in and profit from a win-win economic development project than be bogged down in a lose-lose strategic game between the U.S. and China. Now, Washington right now is totally paralyzed in terms of formulating a response to what Russia and China are doing right now. They tried pushing the TPP, the TTIP, and we can see that has been going nowhere. Germany turned it down. The people have been protesting. Most of Europe is saying absolutely not. Now, this might be one of the reasons why the Department of Justice decided to place this fine on Deutsche Bank, going all the way back to 2008 for the mortgage-backed securities, to try to bring Germany and the rest of Europe in line to say, listen, you pass this TTIP, or we will bring down Europe. But it just won't bring down Europe. This will have a chain reaction, and it will eventually hit the United States. So we can see right now with the situation out in Europe, the United States government central bankers, they are becoming very desperate. And we can see right now they're trying to use economic warfare against countries. They're using actual warfare against countries, because what's happening here is this economic recovery that Obama was talking about is being ripped apart. It is falling apart very, very quickly. They're very worried about it falling apart without them controlling it and bringing it down themselves. And we can see right now they're trying to force countries into doing things that they want. And we can see already this is the beginning, because you know what happens. We start out with an economic war, with economic tactics, and then it always leads to the next step, and that normally ends up in war. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.